Dan Bartels, joined alongside Colin Loughran and Julia Moss in the building.
Yes.
And going to talk some New York Liberty. And it's kind of hard to ignore the Liberty right now. 4-1. They had a great win last night over the Chicago Sky. And Julia, this is an absolute super team. Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones. I just want to hear what you have to say in regards to the Liberty right now.
Yeah, I mean, where to start, really, Yesterday, incredible game. They really played quite terribly the first half, and even in the third quarter, they started to come back, but it still wasn't, lighting it up until the fourth quarter, and, they kind of the first chance we got to see the Liberty, play in clutch minutes of, okay, how are they going to play when the pressure's stacked against them? And, I can definitely say I'm pleased with how it went because obviously they won by a point. Brianna Stewart, incredible bank last second shot. I remember she shot it and I was like, what a dumb shot. But silly me because it's Brianna Stewart. Of course she can make, probably a shot from almost anywhere on the court. But I remember just she put the shot up with 8 seconds left and I'm like, okay, the Liberty are losing. I was like, this is an absurd shot. And then it banks in. I was at SNY, subtle plug. Love my people at SNY, but it was quiet in the room and I just went, oh my God. Everyone looked at me. It was incredible moment. Brianna Stewart. I mean, let's talk about Brianna Stewart because she's had just what an incredible run she's had. I mean, player of the week and player of the month for the Eastern Conference in the WNBA. Has really stepped into that role because, when you have a super team, it's who's going to take that step and be the person. And Brianna Stewart has absolutely taken over that role. And even more surprising, Sabrina Ionescu is, stepping into that player role, for lack of better words, pretty well. I mean, like you said, 4-1. Sabrina Ionescu only scored, I think, 5 points yesterday, and they still won. So the fact that the Liberty can still handle business against good teams, Chicago's 3-3 now. We're 3-2 heading in. A good team has Clea Copper, among other great players. But I think my biggest takeaway is that, you could have all-star caliber players score 5 points and it not be an issue.
Yeah, Brianna Stewart, as you alluded to, Eastern Conference Player of the Month, 25.8 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 3 assists a game, 2.8 steals a game, and from the field, 54.1%, and from three, 45.5%.
She plays with such a tenacity that I think is going to be so much more appreciated now that she's on a bigger market and a bigger stage here in New York. She took, I believe it was an elbow or something to her eye.
Oh my gosh, her eye. Oh my gosh.
I was watching that game, and what I loved about it was she just kept plugging away and kept playing, kept driving to the basket. No fear to her whatsoever. However, the Liberty should be fearful of the Las Vegas Aces. They are really special. I mean, just top to bottom. I look at that backcourt alone. Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, elite for Vegas. Young averaging 22.4 points per game, over 50% from behind the three-point arc. You look at what they have in the middle of the paint. Asia Wilson, she's been just as special there. 19.4 points per game, 8.4 rebounds per game, over 54% from the field. Coached by Becky Hammond, who is a basketball savant by any definition of the term. I just look at the Liberty, and my main concern is, even with all the talent, that takes time to mesh. Great teams need a waiting period. We talk about this in all of our other segments as well. So it's fitting here that we talk about it with the Liberty. They're going to need time to really work together and figure out how to bounce off each other most effectively. That goes for Vandersloot, other players that they have at their disposal. I thought that was a big addition for them, by the way, just to have someone that can always shoot from basically any spot on the court. Vandersloot's going to be important come playoff time later, assuming the Liberty get there, as we all assume they will. Make
incredible facilitator, too, Vandersloot is.
Absolutely. And I just look at the Aces, and they remind me so much of that UConn women's basketball team that was so great for so long, always in the thick of the race. They're going to be hard to beat. The Liberty definitely have a chance to do so. Ionescu has to reach another level for them to do so, in my estimation. I have no doubt she can do it, but how soon is the question?
I mean, it's a fair argument of when you look at this Las Vegas Aces team and the entire starting five have had an all-star at some point. I mean, adding Candace Parker in that last spot is man, this team is almost unbeatable and thus far have been undefeated. So unbeatable in that sense. And, you know, I said this last week on one-on-one, but I think the biggest thing the Aces have, you know, to their advantage is the fact they have time together, like just time on the court together. You know, of course they added Candace Parker, but the other starting four, Jackie Young, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray, you know, they have like last season together, and they played incredible together last season. You know, moving into this year, the Liberty, we're already starting to see some of that, you know, chemistry, you know, gelling. I wouldn't say an issue, just time it takes to, you know how each other play on the court, and that's why we've seen really slow starts from the Liberty thus far. I mean, head coach Sandy Brondello said she's happy to win, but the team needs more of a sense of urgency and doesn't understand why they're so bad in the first half, because they've had slow starts to all of their games.
That's going to matter because you don't want to get down against a team like Vegas.
Exactly. And you don't want to have to bet on like, okay, we'll have a big second half.
They were down at halftime yesterday as well.
Big, like they were down by as many as 12 points during this game. And, you know, as great as it is to be able to, like, you know, perform when the cards are stacked against you, you don't want the cards stacked against you every game of the regular season. And especially when you get to the playoffs, you really want to be able to assert, you know, control from the beginning and not have to claw your way back every time, because that takes a toll physically first, because you have to obviously, you know, try harder, you know, to, you know, it's a different mentality. And also to that note, it takes a lot out of you mentally to always be playing from behind. And, you know, it feels great after the game when you come back from 12 down, 15 down in some cases, but you really want to be able to set that precedent early.
You mentioned the Candace Parker edition for Vegas. I see the Brianna Stewart edition in a similar light. I think Brianna Stewart gives the Liberty more on-court production than Parker will for the Aces.
Oh, for sure.
But that layer of experience is the common thread there, and I think that makes a difference for teams that have championship aspirations. When you sign Candace Parker, you're not just signing what you get on the court. You're signing the type of player she's going to be in the locker room, on trips, when they're on the court and down by 7 to 10 points, someone that can really look at her teammates and say, listen, we have to rally together and play and fight hard back. It's the same thing with Brianna Stewart. They just lead in a different way at their respective phases in their careers.
Brianna Stewart, 39 straight games in double figures. That's insane.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
And to your point about, you know, whether, you know, the difference between the Candace Parker edition and the Brianna Stewart edition is like, you know, the Aces were already good. They didn't have to add someone who can play, has as much like play now ability as Brianna Stewart. The Liberty needed that to be able to compete with the Aces. So while Brianna Stewart, I think, is miles ahead of a better signing than Candace Parker, because even just the age difference. Candace Parker's 37, Brianna Stewart's 28.
It's a different type of signing from a philosophy standpoint.
Because the Aces already have their Brianna Stewart. Like, they have 3 of them, actually.
Exactly.
The Liberty needed Brianna Stewart. They needed Slew. They needed Jonquel Jones just to be able to compete at this point. And, you know, it really raises a question. And this is something that I definitely want to do more research into later of, like, do you think that Candace Parker would have went to the Aces if the Liberty didn't empty the bag on a super team?
Probably not.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but probably not.
I think it's a great question. That's something I want to look into.
It's interesting.
But yeah, I mean, we could have a whole other conversation about, you know, the dynamics of the WNBA now, just because it's so different. Because there were not like the Aces were the version of a super team, like the only real version of like a super team that we had. But the Liberty kind of changed the game in a sense of acquiring a super team in one off season.
Hey, playing for a super team is never a bad decision. Just look at the
Unless
U.S.
you're Kevin
women's
Durant.
national team.
If you're willing to take a pay cut, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, even just having that in terms of your ability to then get greater exposure for endorsement deals, things of that sort. Payment aside, which obviously is an issue that is worth delving into.
Right.
Just being on a super team raises your own personal bar. And I think for a sport that is growing rapidly and will continue to do so, at least having these type of back and forths will be healthy in the long run. Although now it might stifle competition. Imagine how entertaining an Aces Liberty final would be.
Oh.
I was about to say, like...
See, you're ready to go down on the super team. Be like, no, we don't want any of that.
Well,
but yeah, you want to watch it. Don't lie.
No,
the consumer wants a super team.
What I was going to say, it is like a very split thing of like, it's great for the game, of like the future of the game. It's terrible for the because you have like the Aces and the Storm, like the Aces' first game, they beat the Storm 105-64.
Oh.
Like, you don't want to see that. You don't want to watch that on the court. But in the long run, for the future of the WNBA, there are going to be more eyes on the Liberty and the Aces when they play each other than I think any game in the past 20 years. And you even saw that with the NCAA women's tournament with LSU and Iowa. Like, Iowa is really fun to watch. And I think with the NCAA, it's better because there's not that much of a trade-off. Especially now, the competition, I think, is a lot more leveled than we saw, as you alluded to at the beginning of the segment, with the UConn era of when they would, destroy all of their games and win. Breonna Stewart, I mean, just to tie this all together, she won 4 straight national championships with UConn. That's not necessarily fun to watch because UConn was destroying everyone on their way.
I will say, though, I don't think something like the Iowa LSU hype happens without the UConn women's teams. I think growth is a major part of this. I feel the same way about the NBA.
Yeah.
Because, obviously a different set of circumstances, a different set of cultural ideals, in play there. The NBA isn't what it is without those first couple years of Celtics Lakers in the 80s when it really took off. I think the WNBA will benefit from this right now. Competition is not what anyone wants it to be, but it'll get there. You just have to let the super team era phase itself out, and eventually you're going to see a wider spread of talent to different teams, and ultimately that's going to help ratings. That's going to help payment issues come up. So I think right now, New York and Vegas, probably 2 of the best places to have these kind of teams exist. I mean, if you wanted to argue New York and Los Angeles or somewhere in New England, Connecticut.
Vegas loves women's basketball.
Connecticut Sun are good too this year, right?
Yeah.
5-1.
Yep, and that's surprising because Jonquil obviously left for New York, and it's not something we can get into right now, but there's a whole issue about why isn't the league expanding? Because for people who don't know, the WNBA only has 12 teams with 12 roster spots. That's 144. There's only 144 spots in the WNBA, and that leads to the number 1 overall pick in 2021 was just cut from a team. And then if you get drafted in the second round of the WNBA, you might as well start looking to foreign teams because you're not making the roster because the competition is so crazy. And the commissioner, Engelbert, is just like, we just can't expand right now, and doesn't super go into detail as to why. And it's really frustrating because as more eyes get on college basketball, the more they're going to want to see these college basketball players playing in the WNBA, and that can't happen if they can't make the roster. So it really, money is just being lost in droves because we can't expand and roster spots aren't being added. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's we could have a whole segment just on that, but obviously time doesn't permit.
Yeah, and the New York Liberty will play the Chicago Sky again tomorrow, about a day from now, tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the Barclays Center. So Chicago Sky will have a rematch, and we'll see what they have to say. But Julia Moss, we appreciate your time as always and your insight on the New York Liberty. And we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with Lou Orlando.